A man is sitting just outside the firelight. He is not old, not broken, but he is no longer the first one over the ridge. A few winters ago, he would have been the one chasing the wounded antelope into the dark. Now a younger hunter gets there first, then another. His knees hurt in the cold. His back tightens after a long run. The children who once slept against him now sleep beside fires of their own, and somewhere between the laughter behind him and the darkness in front of him, a question begins to form. Did ancient humans have a midlife crisis? Because the midlife crisis feels like one of the most modern things imaginable. Sports cars, affairs, sudden divorces, expensive hobbies. A man in his 40s doing something so strange that everyone around him reaches the same conclusion. He's having a midlife crisis, but the stereotype may be modern, while the feeling underneath it may be ancient. Scientists still argue about the classic version. The phrase itself only entered popular culture in the 1960s, after psychoanalyst Elliot Jake described a period in middle age when people begin to feel time differently. Death stops being abstract. The future stops feeling endless. Life becomes arithmetic. What did I become? What won't happen now? How much is left? Researchers went looking for a clean universal pattern and found something messier. Some people absolutely do blow up their lives in middle age. Others never do. Some fall apart at 25, some at 70. The dramatic stereotype kept slipping through people's fingers, but another pattern kept appearing, a dip. In study after study, when researchers asked people how satisfied they were with life, the graph often bent into a U-shape, fairly high in youth, lower in midlife, higher again later, not in every study, not with identical timing, but often enough to be hard to ignore. And then the whole story got stranger. In 2012, researchers asked a question that sounds ridiculous right up until the answer lands. Do great apes have a midlife crisis? Not metaphorically. The researchers looked at well-being ratings for chimpanzees and orangutans, scored by caretakers who knew the animals well, and mapped those ratings across the lifespan. They found the same broad shape, higher in youth, lower in midlife, higher again later. If that pattern is real, then this feeling was not invented by office jobs. It was not invented by capitalism, suburbs, or self-help books. It may be older than civilization, older than cities, older than money, older in some form than our species itself. That does not prove everything. Measuring an ape's inner life is difficult, and the methods are debated. But once chimpanzees enter the story, the question changes. The most interesting possibility is no longer that modern culture invented the midlife crisis. It is that midlife may be a very old transition in a very old body. And if that transition is ancient, then somewhere in prehistory, someone was the first person to feel it, which means our man by the fire is no longer a metaphor. He is the point. So let's go back to him. He still knows the trails. He still knows the seasons. He knows where water hides when the river shrinks to mud. He knows which berries feed and which ones punish carelessness. But younger hunters are arriving behind him now. Faster legs, better recovery, less pain in the morning. They do not know as much as he knows. Not yet. But they can already do things he used to do without thinking. That transition is where the real question begins, because a midlife crisis is not really about bad purchases. It is about what happens when your body, your status, and your sense of the future all start changing at once. For ancient humans, those changes would have been impossible to ignore. Start with the body. Your body changes before your mind is ready for it. That was true 30,000 years ago just as much as it is now. Strength, speed, reaction time, stamina, recovery, all of them begin shifting long before someone feels old inside. It happens by subtraction. A little less stamina, a little more pain, a little longer to recover from work that once felt easy. In modern life, some of that can be hidden. In a small foraging group, much less of it could be. If you missed the throw, people saw it. If a younger adult started outperforming you at the task that once defined you, the evidence was right there in the dust. And so was the same machinery that ranks status in any primate troop. Younger males rise, older ones fall, and when you can no longer physically defend your position, your whole social world shifts with it. Humans are far more cooperative than chimpanzees, but we didn't evolve outside biology. We inherited nervous systems that cared deeply about rank, relevance, and belonging. That does not mean middle-aged adults became useless. Far from it. In many hunter-gatherer societies, raw physical performance peaks earlier than other forms of value. Older adults often contribute ecological knowledge, childcare, teaching, planning, healing knowledge, social memory, and conflict mediation. A younger hunter may be the one sprinting after the wounded antelope. A 45-year-old may be the reason the hunting party entered the right valley in the first place. That kind of value takes time to build. So ancient midlife was not usually the moment a person stopped mattering. It was the moment they began mattering differently. Midlife is a handoff. The problem is that handoffs hurt because you still remember youth clearly enough to compare yourself against it. You are still healthy enough to want things, still proud enough to feel the loss, still competitive enough to notice that someone younger gets to the ridge first. The darkest ingredient is mortality. A real midlife crisis is not just embarrassment about aging, it is the moment death stops feeling like a rumor. Ancient humans did not need philosophers to remind them they were mortal. Death was not hidden in hospitals. People saw infection, childbirth, violence, famine, winter, predators, children dying young. Death sat close to camp. So why would middle age change anything if death was always visible? Because knowing that humans die is not the same as feeling that you yourself have entered the category of the dying. When you are young, death still feels like it belongs mostly to other people. The old man with the cough, the hunter who slipped. Then one day the edges move. Your recovery is slower. Your parents look frail. Your children become adults. Younger people begin treating you differently. The arithmetic shifts. You are no longer observing the line from a distance. You are standing in it. That realization may be one of the oldest psychological experiences in human history. It does not require wealth, a suburb, or a red convertible. It only requires a brain that can compare past, present, and future inside a body that has started to decline. That does not mean ancient people sat around the fire having abstract breakdowns every night. Life was too demanding for that fantasy. But pressure does not vanish just because life is busy. If anything, it leaks into behavior. A middle-aged hunter whose reputation is slipping might become reckless, trying to prove he still has it. He might insist on joining dangerous pursuits, or become irritable, withdrawn, obsessed with status. Parents in midlife might pour more energy into securing children, strengthening alliances, or asserting control. Different culture, same pressure point. Time is moving. My role is changing. Who am I now? And here ancient life may actually have had one advantage over modern life. Not because it was easier, it was not. Because it often offered a clearer second role. One reason modern midlife can feel so hollow is that many people lose youth without gaining an equally respected replacement identity. The culture praises maturity in speeches and rewards novelty in practice. It tells you to age gracefully without telling you what grace is for. Small-scale societies were not utopias, but they often made the transition more legible. If you were no longer the fastest hunter, you could become the person who decided where to hunt. If you were no longer carrying infants, you could become the reason more infants survived. If you could not outrun danger, you could still be the first to recognize it. That does not erase the sting. It gives the sting somewhere to go, which may help explain the part of the pattern that matters most. Why does the curve rise again? Researchers still debate the details, but one anthropological explanation is especially compelling. Perhaps the dip is not a glitch. Perhaps it is the painful transition between two evolutionary jobs. First, your value comes mostly from what your body can do. Then, increasingly, it comes from what your mind knows. Youth is speed, fertility, strength, display, risk, competition. Later life is memory, judgment, teaching, childcare, alliance management, patience, pattern recognition. Those are not the same role. And the crossing point between them may be exactly what midlife feels like. You are losing the first identity before the second one feels secure. You can no longer be who you were, and you are not yet comfortable being who comes next. That is a recipe for instability. It may also explain why the curve eventually bends upward. Once the handoff is complete, the comparison changes. You are no longer failing to be young. You are succeeding at being older. The race you were losing is no longer the race you are running. For humans, that matters because we are one of the few species that live long past peak reproduction. Women can live decades after menopause. Men too often survive long beyond their physical prime. Evolution usually does not preserve expensive years for no reason. Anthropologists have proposed several explanations for this. The grandmother hypothesis is one of the most famous. In many environments, older women may have increased the survival of grandchildren by helping feed and protect them, and by supporting daughters through the most dangerous years of childrearing. Other researchers point to hunting knowledge, social leadership, conflict mediation, and the simple fact that a group with experienced adults makes fewer catastrophic mistakes. However you frame it, the picture is striking. Humans did not evolve to matter only when young. We evolved in a way that made long post-youth life useful. That does not mean every elder was cherished, or every society treated older adults well. Human beings are too variable and too flawed for that. But it does mean aging was not just a biological leftover. Older people often did things younger people could not. They remembered the last drought. They knew where game went when the weather changed. They recognized edible plants by season. They had already seen the mistake that would get someone killed. That kind of usefulness does not show up in a sprint, it shows up in survival, which means the rise after midlife may not be mysterious at all. If youth is the phase when humans compete to become valuable, later adulthood may be the phase when many finally understand what their value is. Desire narrows, comparison softens, skills consolidate, some ambitions die, but the self becomes easier to inhabit. The second role arrives, and once it arrives, life can feel more stable again. There is no archaeological layer labeled midlife crisis. No skeleton comes with a note attached, saying this 43-year-old became strangely interested in dangerous hunting after realizing his best years were behind him. We are inferring from psychology, primatology, anthropology, and the basic realities of human aging. But the broader conclusion is hard to escape. If modern humans often experience a dip in midlife, and if something like that dip may exist in great apes, and if ancient human life made aging, status loss, and mortality impossible to ignore, then it would be stranger if our ancestors felt nothing than if they felt something very much like what we do. Not the stereotype, the structure underneath it, the collision between declining youth and continuing desire, the shock of realizing that time is no longer theoretical. The instability of losing one identity before the next one has fully formed. That is ancient. So, did ancient humans have a midlife crisis, if you mean the full modern package, the sports car, the affair, the impulsive reinvention? Then no, those are modern costumes. But if you mean the deeper event, the point in life where the body starts changing, the younger generation starts arriving, death feels closer, status becomes harder to hold, and the self has to be rebuilt around a different kind of value, then very likely, yes. And once you see it that way, the whole phenomenon looks different. The midlife crisis is not some ridiculous glitch of suburban life. It may be the painful middle point between being useful for your strength and being useful for your knowledge. Midlife is a handoff, and handoffs hurt. So picture that man at the edge of the fire again. He hears the younger hunters laughing behind him. He feels the ache in his legs. He knows with a clarity he did not have 10 winters ago that he will not outrun time. But he also knows where the herds turn when the rains fail. He knows which route feeds and which route kills. He knows who in the camp still hates whom. He knows which boast is harmless and which one ends in blood. He knows what mistake will get a boy killed before sunrise. His value did not disappear. It changed. The fastest hunter became the camp's memory. The camp still needed what only time could build.